I am so honored to be joined by two colleagues here, John and Cindy. I'll let them introduce themselves in a minute, but to just kind of set the table for where we're going today, really looking into leading through uncertainty and infusing strategies with strengths, focusing on our people, how we can empower our people to navigate these trying times of changes, policy changes, personnel changes on staff, new leaders, a new president coming in, a technology implementation that takes a village to manage and do. So how can we build that resiliency among our campus community and use our strengths, strengths finder, we'll get into that, as a compass to guide that work. So I will kick it over to John, if you'd like to introduce yourself first and your journey with strengths. And actually, if you could just set the table for all of us on what is Clifton Strengths, that would be great too.
Excellent. Thank you, Nicole. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I think we're going to end for a fantastic conversation. Setting the table for Clifton Strengths. I always go back to the words because I think words matter. So the definition of what a talent theme is, because it starts with a talent theme and then you build towards a strength. The talent theme definition is natural recurring pattern. So it happens automatically. I don't have to think about, I'm an achiever. What does an achiever do? I just automatically do it. Natural recurring pattern, thought, feeling, or behavior. And this is really important because I think, and especially in higher education, we reward people who think great thoughts. We will reward people who do great things. So the doing and the thinking, we're all in. It's the feeling and the how do we measure that? And what does that look like? And oftentimes in the workplace, we're told, this person has too many feelings. But I can tell you, working with somebody who has strong empathy, they're on my team. I want them because they see things in that EQ, that emotional intelligence that are so important that someone like me who has empathy 35 out of 34 strengths, not going to see it. And so it's a natural recurring pattern of thought, feeling, or behavior that we can productively apply. And we're going to give some great examples this afternoon of what productively applied looks like, especially when we talk about change and transition and using AI and the human factor in AI, all those things to unpack.
And tell us a little bit about your campus and what you do.
So I got started with Clifton Strengths about 10 years ago. And the campus I was at, the University of Kansas, we were going to implement Clifton Strengths for our first-time full-time freshmen and with our faculty and staff. And so a friend of mine who wanted me to get involved with the project said, you should take the assessment. And I had heard about it, but to be honest, it sounded like horoscopes. It's like, you can go this and the moon will come there. And I know, I made that joke intentionally. So I took the assessment and I did what I tell everyone to do, which when I got my results, I shared it with someone who knew me really well over 20 years. And she looked at the results and she said, do you remember when we went on holiday? And I said, yeah. And she says, it says right here, get up in the morning, first thing, and make a list every day of what you need to do. I'm like, yeah. She said, when we went on holiday, you made a list at 5 a.m. in the morning. I'm like, yeah, doesn't everybody get up at 5 a.m. and do that list?
No.
Apparently not, especially on holidays. So I learned something there. It really invited me in. And the report, I can't tell you how many times I've been with either a group or someone individually where they say, how do they know this about me? And that's really important. How do they know this about me? They get to see themselves with that report in a very, very special way because it says, this is what you do right every day. And so got involved at the University of Kansas, working with students, working with faculty, working with staff, working with community partners. 6 years ago, I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, downtown Atlanta, where Georgia State's located. I'm an associate dean in the College of Arts and Sciences. And I figured, okay, now that strength stuff was fun. I'm on to do other things. And, they put a little small snippet in my announcement that I was a certified Clifton Strengths coach. And I had students and I had faculty and I had staff and community members saying, we want to know more about this. And so I've really just kind of taken my professional coaching kind of on the road, going to different places, especially here in Georgia. I'm very passionate about working with nonprofits, under-resourced individuals and organizations who have huge amount of impact on the daily welfare and daily well-being of the citizens of Georgia. So that's kind of my story.
Amazing. Thank you for joining us today. And we'll kick it a little bit more up north to Cindy. If you want to talk about your journey with strengths and where you are today on campus, that'd be great for the audience.
Sure. And thank you for having me. Talking about strengths is always so easy and fun and comfortable and uplifting. And it started for me with my career in student affairs. At the time here at Bridgewater State University, I was the director of student involvement and leadership. And as part of that role, led the orientation program. And my colleagues and I were worried about designing training in that particular year where we were using different assessments and we weren't happy with the outcomes. We were having students that were coming in and this assessment says I'm an introvert. I'm not right for this job. I shouldn't have gotten this job. Um, it didn't matter if we changed the presenter, the timing, the approach, like everything we were trying wasn't working. And so we said, we just need to shake it up a little bit. And we did all the things that we probably shouldn't have done in the beginning, where we said, you know what, let's buy the book and figure this out ourselves. So, as a team, and I can, at the time it seemed like the right thing to do. As a team in my department, we all got the book, we all took the assessment, and we all kind of shared what we learned from that. From there, we started working with the orientation leaders and gave it a try. There's, facilitated workshops I've done very well in my life. I would not chalk that one up as one of them, but it was a start. And the impact of that was starting to see students finding themselves, everybody finding a way in, really is what it was, finding themselves in what we were trying to do as a group. That led to trying for new programs. And for me, it was, every time we tried it, it got better. We brought Gallup folks to campus to do some cross departmental training. So we had one large group initial venture into bringing together departments like the academic advisors and the student life folks and the HR folks and everyone together to just see what we could do. It has grown to the point, from there where we had a group of strengths champions on campus where we would come together regularly to talk about applications of the results of the assessment. And also then, I would try to help those folks learn to facilitate the introductory workshops. Growing that over time was an incredible opportunity to not only help our colleagues learn a new skill set, but to also help then take it on the road, as John said, to different teams looking to make an impact at the team level and really just helping folks navigate through what it meant for them personally. I will always tell the story about strengths, also relating to a student who approached me after an emerging leaders workshop and just said, this has changed me going forward. And I'm like, listen, you've been here for all of a day and a half. How is this changing you going forward? And she said, all my life I've been taught that the leader is the person at the head of the table.
Wow.
You have taught me that my preference for being a supporting member, for being the person with the more executing oriented themes, helping the work move forward. You've taught me that there's a role to play and that I should align with that and not just try to be the person at the head of the table because I don't feel comfortable there. And I'm like, geez, we've got to figure out how to do more of this. And I always think back as a student, like if all of us had had the chance to have that kind of personal insight right when you step foot on campus, what impact that could have in the choices that you make going forward. Fast forward a number of years later, my current role is in the Division of Academic Affairs. I'm the assistant provost for strategic initiatives. Now our strengths initiative has changed a great deal where the folks doing most of the work around Clifton Strengths right now is actually our human resources area. They have really embraced the opportunity that this could play with developing teams, helping brand new managers to really refocus their leadership style. They've also used it in job coaching in HR just to have a look. And, Nicole's focus on navigating through uncertain times, has really shown up in the conversations they've led back there because it really all just comes down to a common language where you can use to talk about what makes you interesting, what makes you potentially a contributor, and also have a common language to help you see where things might not be aligning. So I could talk about this all day long, but truly the impact here has been in, especially, a group of students that we work with here, believing in themselves and realizing what they can contribute has been a really empowering opportunity to be a part of the conversation.
So we've got some seasoned vets in the house when it comes to strengths in and around campuses and the communities that you serve at large, to kind of bring it back into that lens of navigating uncertainty. I'm curious if there's a certain strength or maybe a theme that you think is especially useful in those situations of high ambiguity, and how can leaders sort of cultivate it in themselves or layer, those different strengths within their teams? Is there anything that really stands out to you as something that can guide others in those times of uncertainty? And you're already like, yeah. So tell me.
Yeah. You want me to start? I can start. Yeah. So I'm already thinking like, okay, let's unpack this a little bit.
Uh-huh.
One of the things I would start, let's say I was coaching you on this question. One of the things I
Okay.
would start to unpack would be, let's look at your top five, because those are the top five talent themes that are going to show up every day, twice a
Mm-hmm.
day, 3 times a day, all the time. And one of the things to think about too is this: while they are your top five, they interact with each other, right? Think of the
Mm-hmm.
chemical compounds, right? You have oxygen and you have hydrogen, and you put them together and you make water. And so one of the things to think about when we talk about uncertainty is, do you need to spend some time thinking about what that uncertain topic is? What's in front of you? What are some of the issues you're seeing? Or do you feel like you need to act on that uncertainty? And what does that look like if you do? Or are there individuals you could reach out to strengthen, maybe even develop new relationships in this uncertain time? The fourth one is, who can you have impact and influence on? And the
Mm-hmm.
reason I brought those four up, because those are the four what we call domains of talent. And so what you do is you say, in times of uncertainty, and let's go back to a recent time of uncertainty, which is COVID. And
Yeah.
I have futuristic in my top five. I think someone else does too in their top five. In 2020, futuristic was put on my shelf next to my, favorite award or something, and it said, "We'll be back. Just stay right there. You're not going to go anywhere." But to think about the future was really difficult to do in those times,
Mm-hmm.
and honestly, could be very unproductive because there was just so much uncertainty. What did happen was this: it really doubled down on being strategic. Okay, we can't teach in person, so let's teach online. We can't do internships in person, let's do internships online. Can we do different events? How can we continue to do this community outreach that we do here at Georgia State, knowing that we have to be strategic in our efforts and that we're going to be doing a lot of Zoom outreach? And so doing things a little differently, trying to find, again, somebody who's high executing, but has to be very intentional about it. That's an example of how you might go through that uncertainty.
I'm laughing at your reference to COVID, John, because that's the example I use all the time where, I have futuristic as my number one. And until I figured out that put it on the shelf moment that John just talked about, I was having a lot of trouble. Like, feel like I want to contribute. Why does this not feel like we're going anywhere? And then, oh, wait a minute, there's language to describe this.
Uh-huh.
And it really was exactly what you said. When it comes to sometimes the different themes, and as John said before, they work together. So it's hard to isolate, individual
Mm-hmm.
themes. But if you could imagine them all as like cartoon characters on some like horribly nerdy TV show, the arrival of ideation into the room, for example, I think I have that on my top five too, and I can think of 15 different possibilities. My strategic can help us choose between those possibilities and think about a path forward. You think about leveraging those different pieces during COVID, the conversation about how you keep people connected, really needed those folks with high relationship building themes
Mm-hmm.
and thinking about what people need at the time. Individualization is high for me. So, it was, who have I talked to and who have I not talked to that I usually talk to at work? And so making specific outreach and how are you doing? What do you need? Kinds of conversations, came quickly to me. But I think the takeaway here was also that Gallup will talk a lot about, these are your superpowers. And remembering, though, that what seems obvious to me because of my talent makeup is not obvious to the person next to me because their talent makeup is different. So during uncertain times when you may be frustrated, you know, lean into what makes you unique and strong, and realizing that this is just how you see the world more quickly than the rest of us. I find it sometimes helps lessen stress and helps lessen frustration, and you can feel like this is how I can be empowered and how I can contribute.
Yeah, I really love the COVID example because I blacked it out of my mind, quite frankly. And it truly was such a hard time for a lot of people, especially higher education. There's a lot to pivot, a lot of unknowns, but if you come together and you leverage what makes you unique, I think those are things that help become a magnet for others and support and community. So if we use strengths as an anchor in uncertain times, I'm curious if you believe that it can shift when the uncertainty is external, like AI, artificial intelligence, versus internal, like a campus reorg. Is there any sort of agility or difference in leveraging those strengths, or are you restacking the deck when you think internal versus external uncertainty?
That's a really good question. And I can think of a external example and an internal example.
Yeah.
The external example being that we're going to do a $80 million campus renovation project here in Atlanta. We're super excited about it. The Woodruff Foundation has given us a $80 million gift. We're moving forward on this. One small problem, we have to have it done by May 2026.
Oh.
And I'm talking 9 different buildings are going to be impacted. And we have less than 2 years to do this work. So because the World Cup is coming to Atlanta, they want this all done before the World Cup. So that's a huge external. And so immediately strategic, top number one talent team is like, okay, what about this? What about this? This building is this. And I start going in this mode of strategic and futuristic, how to think about this, talking with others about what's this going to look like? How are we going to address this question? That mode is now flip it to the internal. We're searching for a new dean. And so I still think those talent themes show up the same way because I'm thinking, okay, the new dean's going to onboard, let's say in February or March. We've got to time lay out the first 3 months. What key meetings do we need to set in place? Other things we need to do. And again, strategic and futuristic, like we said, are the cartoon characters coming into play here. And so I love that, by the way. That's awesome. So
I'm picturing it.
Yeah, right. It's a great image. So I really do think your brain doesn't know the difference sometimes. And because your brain doesn't know the difference, your talent themes might show up the same. I don't know. That's my thought.
And I'm wondering, I generally also agree that I'm not sure it makes all that much of a difference, but it does, your choice in how you react definitely makes a difference. So things you are doing versus things that are being done to you, right? Do you feel agency for what's happening, or do you feel like you have to react? You might leverage different parts of your talent portfolio depending on that. Those that have high executing themes might feel more comfortable, hey, I need to approach leadership of my organization to talk about the impact this is having, or you may not. You may feel like that's a moment where your talent calls to do that. Other times you're like, this is not the way I do my work, nor is it appropriate to my role. But we all make choices about how we're going to react in uncertain times, and things that are happening from the outside. Decisions you make every day and how you're going to react do have a lot to do with your talent makeup, I think.
Nicole, I think that's a great point because we talk about a talent theme developing into a strength. And I always talk about it as time on task. The more you understand, develop, become aware of that talent theme, the more likely it'll become a strength. But that's a really good point because agency is kind of like that secret sauce. It's the volume dial that turns that talent up to a strength. If I'm confident that I can have a developer and arranger and really just interact with people and get them, developing as individuals and developing as teams and putting them in the right places to do that work. But if I don't have agency to do that work, that talent theme may not show up.
Well, let's dive into that for a second because we all work in higher education where agency may be not very popular amongst teams depending on where you work. And so how can folks who are invested in maximizing their strengths and craving that agency and wanting to be unique and standing out, how can they align that with organizational priorities and culture that can sometimes sort of be at odds?
Boy, if we had that question solved, we would be we'd be off the call and on the call with
Yes.
25 presidents saying we've got the secret
Yeah.
sauce.
So I'm hoping we can all come up with the secret sauce
Yeah.
right now on air and go into business together.
Yeah.
Yeah, start with that one where actually
Mm.
implementing the Clifton Strengths work here on campus is an example of that for me,
Okay.
where deciding to get started with it. I mentioned like a group of 8 of us reading a book together. That's not a campus wide. We all should
No.
do this kind of leveraging, and it started small. If we had
Mm-hmm.
started with everybody's going to do this,
Mm.
we probably wouldn't have gone anywhere because at the time, and we're still not at that point where everyone's doing it.
Right.
We decided that a more incremental, like, let's focus on the coalition of the willing, let's make progress where we have the ability to make some decisions on how we're going to approach things. We started it with our own program that we were responsible for making decisions for. So the question of expectations, comes into play
Mm-hmm.
here. If we were, and actually I laughed, John, when you mentioned the doing it with all incoming students, we had a few moments where we wanted to do that. And then I was actually the one who talked my then supervisor out of it
Mm.
because I didn't feel like we had the infrastructure to support, having good conversations about the assessment results.
Yeah.
We want students to be able to walk into anybody's office and say, here's my top 5, and the person to know actually what to say back. We weren't at that
Mm.
point yet. So I was worried about it and then
Mm-hmm.
successfully talked her out of it. But, at the time when it comes to scaling and decisions on what you do have agency for, sometimes it's worth starting on what you can control.
Yeah.
And other times it's not worth, you've got to be
Back on the shelf.
persistent.
Yeah.
Yeah, but sometimes you have to go big or go home too, and
Okay. Yeah.
realizing big impact and who you have to be connected to make that kind of big impact. John, what do you think on this theme?
No, I think that's some really great insight. I wish I would have had some of that knowledge actually a few years ago. Here's something to think about. As I was listening to you talk, I was thinking about an example. So we have an academic leadership development institute in the College of Arts and Sciences. We ask individuals to apply for it. They're faculty here in the College of Arts and Sciences, and we run them through a series of leadership workshops over an academic year. And one of the first ones they do is Clifton Strengths.
Mm-hmm.
I and my colleague are firm believers in it. We understand that in terms of leadership development is professional development. So professional development ties right into that. And I remember one year I was doing the workshop and I finished up and I had a faculty member come up to me and she was very excited. She's like, this is great. I have learned so much about myself. I really want to be a leader in my department. I was like, oh, good. What are some areas that you care about? She says, our curriculum needs to be really addressed because it's kind of outdated. I said, okay, well, that's, curriculum is an us conversation, not a I conversation, as I say. And she said, here's the problem. Nobody wants to talk about it. How do I bring people into this work? Again, what I'm hearing is I have no agency, so therefore my talents will not show up. And
Right.
so I don't know how I did this. I just said this question. Before Don Clifton, I told her, before Don Clifton had the actual assessment, he had questions. What brings you pleasure? Keeps, things like flow, things like what creates energy in the work that you do, basically. And so Dr. Clifton, by asking these questions, was able to develop and see patterns, and those patterns became talent themes. And so I just happened to have the list of questions that they used. And I said, start with asking questions about what do people care about? What
I
gets
like
them
that.
excited about it? What about the
Mm-hmm.
curriculum from not their classes, but from the student's point of view? What do you think our curriculum does well? And just don't go into a statement mode, go into an inquiry mode. We are all researchers, right? And so we enjoy the questioning of things.
We're curious. Yeah.
As human beings, we are naturally curious. And so
Uh-huh.
that gave her that agency to have those conversations. And they did make some adjustments. But I think that the key point that I take away from that is that it really is important that when you have those moments where you don't feel like you have agency and you're trying to address an issue, you have to ask yourself, how do I bring people into the work as opposed to push them out? How do I
Yep.
bring, and for relationship builders, that looks different. For executors, that looks different. For those who need to influence, like with command and self-assurance, that looks different. So we want to make sure we want to make sure that we bring that into our work, if that makes sense.
No, I love that you said that, because for everybody that might be listening in that has never taken the StrengthsFinder assessment, we're not here being like, go buy it today. We're here saying our experience using this tool has illuminated insights in our professional and probably personal lives. And with that, if you don't want to go, subscribe to this particular tool, there's a set of questions out there that exist that just get you thinking about what your individual talents and strengths may be. And I love the idea of just asking questions, because in this AI economy that we're living in, the questions are way more important than having all the answers. That goes for leadership as a whole, right? We need to be asking more thoughtful questions that get people on track to think towards what is that outcome? What is that end goal? How can we get there? And a kind of final question before we wrap this up in a neat little bow, because we don't unfortunately have all day to geek out over strengths, and I wish we did. I'm curious how some of the more squishy strengths, the more feelings type strengths, how do you demonstrate impact and value when it's really hard to quantify? Like something like empathy or learner, I love learning, or I'm really empathetic. Like how, because we're moving into, machines and humans, these are very uniquely human traits that machines can mimic, but they might not actually inherently possess. So how can we empower those with maybe the more squishy strengths to make them tangible and apply them in their day-to-day as a value add versus just a touchy-feely concept, if that makes sense?
I have so much to say on this topic.
I know, do I.
Please.
Buckle
Go
up.
first, Cindy. Go first, Cindy.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned empathy, and I have some very close colleagues and also some coaching clients that we've had a lot of conversation about that as a talent. And if you had to pick one, for at least for me, from the list of 34 that I have the hardest time selling as a talent, it's that.
Yeah.
But we also have to put it in the context of, I mean, years and years and years of study relating to leadership, has not rewarded, the
Right.
people-centered talents when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
leadership. So, if you're looking for one assessment to fix that, that's not going to happen. But all of this is in context of societal understanding of what makes a leader. We're remembering, assumptions that folks bring in, their worldview, their assumptions about people, their assumptions about what it takes to be strong. All
Mm-hmm.
of this comes into conversation about, the roles that people play in the art and science of leadership. So, whether it's a lens through, I mean, even just thinking about gender, women, and that women bring soft and touchy feely skills into leadership settings. We could go on for hours about other assumptions about men, other non-binary folks. We've got
Mm-hmm.
race, we've got religion, we've got so many dimensions of what makes people unique. What something like Clifton Strengths, for me at least, boils down to that bringing in this superpower and this ability to drive change, or the ability to navigate uncertainty. If we are paying attention to both the process and the product of how these things happen, we can demonstrate the uniqueness of people and the contributions that we make. If we're only focusing on the end product of this new thing we've produced, and we're not paying attention to how it got there, then we're missing a lot of what Nicole just described about the uniqueness of people. And, in this age of machine learning, what people can do that machines can't do. It's figuring out, billions of different combinations of talent that it takes to move a project from start to finish. I'll stop there. Sorry, John, but this is
No,
big
this is
stuff.
great. It got me thinking, and I really do appreciate. The wonderful thing about strengths, I will say this, is that Cindy and I align a lot alike, and the reason why I think is because I hear her talent themes coming out, right? And I can see the individualization. I hear it, right? I hear the futuristic. So it is a language. It's a that you have to learn. But once you learn the language, it is kind of like that secret sauce. So I can get to work, and we can start to hear each other and understand where each other's coming from. I think every not every coaching conversation, but a lot of coaching conversations, one of the things I ask is there a top 5 or top 10 talent theme that you have that you don't like?
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes
I like,
people will say, like in their top 5, I have something I don't like. And it's like, well, why don't you like it? Well, I have this reason or that reason. So empathy, I think, gets looked at because how do you measure empathy? And
right.
one of the things I would say, just to give a little defense to empathy, is this. When let's say you're doing market research, if you really want to know what consumers think, you can quantify that all you want. But you can also create an amazing message with a story, right? You can create an amazing message with the human side of a product, whether that
Mm-hmm.
product's a cell phone, a strengths mug, or whatever it might be. Yeah, right? There's that FOMO, and empathy understands that and can bring people into that. So I really think that, for me, that strength that I don't like, that I have trouble with sometimes, is significance. I have a good colleague who has it, and I've had colleagues who've had it, and it's an influencing theme. I have to be on the stage. I have to be seen as having impact. And like, can you not have that impact today, please?
Tone it down for today.
Tone it down first. And it's on me then to check myself and say, what is it about that theme that bothers you? What is it about that strength that someone else has that seems to just rub you the wrong way? And how do you work with that in your own town themes, right? Whether you're a relationship builder, whether you two are an influencer, whatever that might look like. So there's I won't call it dark side, we'll call it a gray side to every town theme, I think. I think it's
Yeah.
really important that if you have that in your top 5 or top 10, that you see it in yourself, but also that you can kind of, as again, learning the language of strengths, you kind of get into these details and saying, oh, well, if you have self-assurance, what does it look like when it's not productive? And
I'm
that's
sure
a
we've
great
seen
question.
that.
And that's a great starter question to start to build some understanding of how someone else sees the world.
Yeah, I really like that. For me, I look at the very end of my strengths, like number 34, and I'm like, that's the one when I meet someone who has that, I'm like, I don't like that person. But really, it's because I don't have that in myself and I don't know. Well, I mean, I have it, right? But it's very low. And I don't know how to interact with it because it's just not part of my purview. Shockingly, it's harmony for me. As the strong influencing theme, yeah, harmony is my last one because I'm like, let's just go, let's make the decision, let's do it. But to kind of wrap us up, I would love to hear your top 5 because we've been alluding and we've seen the mugs, but would love for you to end on your top 5. And as with every SME suite, I always do kind of a little fill in the blank or final thought to leave our audience with. And for today, I think something about, in navigating uncertain times in higher education, looking at your strengths can blank. Something along those lines if you want to leave our audience off with a little nugget. So hit me with your top 5, hit me with your final thoughts, and we'll wrap us up for today.
Go ahead, John.
Okay, my top 5 are strategic, achiever, developer, arranger, and futuristic. They show up every day. My full title, ready for Cindy, is Associate Dean for Strategic Initiatives. Literally, that's my job title. So it's like, oh, okay. My final thought is this, and I'm going to go back to something we talked about, which is AI and artificial intelligence. And I like ChatGPT. I use it quite a bit.
Yeah.
If you get the assessment results, put your top 5 in and see what it comes out. But here's the thing. It'll give you a plan. It'll tell you this is this talent theme strategic. This is how it shows up. This is what you might want to think about. Maybe ask a good question or two. But Don Clifton said this long ago. Strengths develop in concert with others. In other words, I don't develop strategic by myself. I develop it when I work with others. And it shows up when I work with others. So AI is great, but AI is the tool like Clifton Strengths, and it's how we use the tool that matters.
Yep.
And so one final thought about navigating uncertain times and using strengths, I would say navigate those uncertain times using strengths by showing up every day and doing what you do best. And if you can't figure that out, Clifton Strengths is a great way to do that.
Awesome.
That's great. So my top five, number one, futuristic. Number two, individualization. Number three is communication. Number four is ideation. And number five is activator. Activator definitely gets me in a lot of trouble, but I generally like them all. I would say, my position title at Bridgewater State is Assistant Provost for Strategic Initiatives. So John and I share themes as well as a business card, right? It's very interesting. There's 1,000 combinations of structures, but our two are more aligned than I think anyone I've ever met. That's really interesting. But I would say, my final thought is that going back to the definition, of talent that John talked about, at the end of the definition, the phrase that can be productively applied. And I always highlight this can be part for coaching clients because we make choices every day of how we're going to share our gifts, how we're going to share our time, where we're going to put our focus. So for higher ed leaders right now, with so much uncertainty, there's so much demanding our time. Our jobs were tough already, it's just getting more and more complicated. So when you need to, we talk about work-life balance and all that good stuff, but a yoga class and a day off are great, but tools to manage really your own headspace for how you're going to lead a fulfilling life and a meaningful life this can give you a bit of a shorthand to know, like, there are times where your unique gifts are called for. And this gives you a way to hear the description of a project or an opportunity. You're like, oh, that really has to be me. And saying yes, when there are things like, that could probably be anybody around this table. So I'm going to, look down and try to avoid eye contact and hope somebody else says yes. But, we make choices every day to apply our talents. And I think Clifton Strengths can help give really busy people some guidance on what will give you the shortest distance between, now and whatever brings you the most fulfillment in your career. So I think Clifton Strengths can, be one of many answers to how to lead a more fulfilling life.
Love that. And for me, it's funny because we have all little shared pockets of themes, which is why I think I found everyone. It all happens for a reason, right? My top is strategic as well. Activator number two definitely gets me in trouble. Realization, command, and arranger. That would be my top five. And I think when I look at this in higher education and navigating uncertainty, the real benefits that are apparent to me are things like social capital. I think strengths are a great tool to build social capital. And I think this is one of the areas in higher education that we could be doing a whole lot better for our students, because it's that social capital that will lead to career readiness and outcomes. Finding yourself that mentor who believes in you, that teacher who believes that you're a peer, with the rise of AI is filling a lot of those roles for a lot of people, but it's truly the agency and social capital and shared experience that I think strengths can bring to a campus that will lead us further into the future and equip us with the skills, students, faculty, staff, and the like, to not only live a fulfilling life, but be their own person and own that. So thank you both so much for joining me today. Really fun conversation and more to come.